it was simply that the novelty of Vegas was already wearing thin. "Hey, aren't you Leandro Oliveira?" He looked to his left to see 3 men looking at him, eager grins on their faces. He tipped his head in acknowledgement and rose from his seat, moving toward their table. They all shook his hand and got him to sign napkins. No photography allowed in the club for obvious reasons. "Man, I couldn't believe the way Maddox did you in that last fight." "What a fucking pussy," said one of them, his words a bit slurred. "I know, right?" chimed in one of the others. "If I were you, I'd be so pissed. Not much of a championship fight." Leandro schooled his face into a neutral expression and clapped the guy on the shoulder, harder than was necessary. "Next time we'll be different," he said, and although it was a casual statement, it was also a promise to himself. He signaled to the waitress to bring them another round and put it on his tab. "Enjoy your evening," he said, telling himself as he sat back down that they were drunk and hadn't meant anything by it. They thought they'd been commiserating, not rubbing salt into a wound that wouldn't quite heal. The waitress had brought him a fresh drink while he'd been over at the other table, and he took a large sip. Fucking Maddox. 3 weeks ago, Leandro had won the light heavyweight championship belt, stealing it from Maddox, but the victory was tainted. The bastard had barely fought him, ducking and dodging the entire time, refusing to engage. In the end, the fight had gone to a decision, and while Leandro had won, it felt hollow. He had the belt, but only because Maddox had decided it was time to retire. Leandro hadn't earned it, and for the first time in his life, his failure to earn something— it bothered him. It made him restless and hungry, and maybe a little angry. He didn't want people to think he wasn't worthy of the title of champion. Granted, he'd spent most of his life simply being handed things, like an $800 million trust fund and an expensive European education that he never used. He had multiple homes, including a mansion on the outskirts of Vegas, with a garage full of fancy cars and a closet full of Armani, Dior, Burberry, and Tom Ford. All of it was his by right as an Oliveira. The fact that he hadn't earned any of those things didn't bother him. They were simply his. But the belt? Yeah. Feeling as though he'd been handed the first thing he'd ever really worked for burned his ass. He felt unsatisfied. Well, if it isn't my favorite MMA champion," a female voice rasped against his ear, and he turned to look over his shoulder. Red stood just behind him, her fire-engine red hair tumbling over her shoulders in thick waves. She smiled at him, her eyes sparkling with mischief. He returned her smile. "You dance for other champions?" She sent him a coy look and mimed zipping her lips shut. Red was one of his favorite dancers at the Pearl, sweet and smart, and so damn flexible. They'd fucked a couple of times in recent history, and a flicker of heat surged through him at the memory of her spread out beneath him. "Like what you see, champ?" she asked, doing a slow turn for him. She wore nothing but a skimpy white leather halter and G-string that barely covered her fun bits. He winked at her. "You know I do." She leaned down, draping her arm over the back of his chair. "Maybe I need a refresher." Without waiting for an invitation, she planted a knee beside his hip, half straddling him. "You want to dance?" She brought her other knee up, settling herself on his lap. Leaning into him, she draped her arms over his shoulders. He glanced toward the rest of his group, reminding himself that it was Thiago's night, not his. "Maybe another time." She laughed and rose from his lap. "Sure thing, champ." She let her gaze dip down his body, and then with a wink and a saucy hair flip, she walked away. Thiago's stripper, done simultaneously entertaining and tormenting him, picked her bra up from the floor and sauntered away, glancing back at their group as she left. "I think she likes you," said Leandro, chuckling at Thiago's red cheeks and labored breathing. Thiago let out a long breath and took a sip of his drink. "And I think I'm in love."